Buenos días y bienvenidos al evento del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, Chile 2050, un país, 4 presidentes. Este evento está siendo transmitido simultáneamente en español e inglés via Zoom, YouTube,
Welcome to our event today, Chile 2050, one country, 4 presidents. We have simultaneous interpretation services available. You can just pick up your equipment in the back.
Organized by Inter-American Development Bank, Chile 2050, one country, 4 presidents. The event is being streamed simultaneously in Spanish and English via Zoom, YouTube, and LinkedIn. For the participants in the room, we have headsets available with English interpretation that you can grab from the table at the bottom of the conference room. Sin más preámbulo, comencemos el evento con las palabras de bienvenida del economista jefe y gerente general.
We now will begin with the opening comments by our General Manager, Eric Parrado.
Muchas gracias, Mariela.
Thank you very much, Mariela, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to open this very special event, and we're very lucky to come in early and have some interesting conversations, and that's why I'm very pleased to be able to host this event and welcome on behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank. This is a major landmark event. We're launching a publication, Chile 2050, one country, 4 presidents. And it's important to welcome our guests who are going to discuss the future of Chile and their very valuable lessons that they can share, not just for Chile, but for Latin America overall. We're very honored to have President Michelle Bachelet, Eduardo Frei, who I admire, as well as Cecilia Morel, former First Lady and former Minister of Finance, Enrique Larraín. And it was really Enrique who launched this unique project where we have a forum with our 4 former presidents, President Frei, President Bachelet, who will help us address many of the future perspectives for Chile. We'd also like to welcome Anabel Gonzalez, who's connected online, and Brian Winter, director, editor of America's Quarterly, who I'm sure are going to help enrich this discussion. Let me just start off with just a personal comment. Here at the bank, I had an opportunity to interact with these 2 former presidents, addressing very relevant issues, looking at how we can accelerate transactions in terms of encouraging foreign direct investment, which has been crucial for Chile's investment. And with President Bachelet, we've identified ways to improve and address and bridging gender gaps. And in fact, we were asking for recommendations, diagnostic studies, and the president was very motivated to go even beyond the analysis. She may not know this, but in a recent study that was accepted by the experts on political economy, so we're looking at a breakdown of key data broken down by sex, and we found that there is discrimination in the marketplace, gender discrimination. And we conducted an extrapolation, and we saw what we lose in terms of not giving enough opportunity to women is around, value-wise, $12 billion in losses. So we are seeing that we're assuming the same risks with gender discrimination as we've seen with other forms. So this experience has been reflected by the importance of rigorous research in public policies. And it's precisely these types of challenges and opportunities that are addressed in depth in this white paper. And as a Chilean, very proud to have been working and advising governments I have witnessed a lot of these major efforts. We've seen increases in GDP, but we've also seen a reduction in income inequality, improvements in life expectancy. These achievements are testimony of the resilience of our economy. Now, Chile is at a turning point, looking at opportunities for reinventing their development models. Their multiple and complex challenges and low productivity, as well as low levels of economic growth, are some of the key concerns. In addition, we're addressing other challenges such as inequality, the need to improve the quality of education, modernization of the state, citizen security, and adaptation to climate change. And also looking at the gender gap in the labor markets, access to loans and credit, as was addressed earlier. This white paper provides us some very valuable lessons based on the experiences that have guided Chile over the last few years, such as how to address there's 7 key lessons learned, and don't worry, these are 7 key lessons. First of all, we have the strengthening of democracy and the rule of law. So all 4 former presidents agree on the need for creating a sound democratic institutions that require strengthening these institutions, also promote citizen participation and promote respect for institutions. The challenges and opportunities include new ways of governance, strengthening citizen confidence in the democratic processes and systems. Number 2, inclusive democratic development. This is not just enough, but it's not enough just to encourage society. Not only does this launch growth, but it ensures that the benefits are evenly distributed. This includes fostering new innovations, becoming more efficient, and creating that environment that is conducive for effective policies that can reduce poverty and inequality. Number 3, investments in human capital. The quality in education and job growth are fundamental in increasing competitiveness, providing the necessary momentum for the education system to meet the challenges of the 21st century and strengthen their adaptability. Not just addressing the informal economy, but we also need to continue reconversion measures so that we can adapt to technological changes. This has become even more important with changes in technology. Also strengthening open economy toward the global economy. We're going to be discussing some of these areas. Chile has been able to quadruple its exports of goods and services since the 1990s. This has been an amazing achievement. Now the challenge is to add more value to our exports and diversify our economy. We need to leverage the economic agreements signed onto and look for new opportunities. 5, leadership and sustainability. With vast natural resources, Chile has an opportunity to lead the clean energy revolution, addressing new infrastructure that will leverage the dynamics in energy, especially green hydrogen, solar, wind energy, to address climate change challenges and create new jobs, high-quality jobs and industries. 6, modernization of the state and improving governance. So, this new concept in Chile that represents an opportunity for reinventing governmental processes. The challenges are to implement the transactions, reduce red tape, and foster new innovations in the public sector, which includes digitizing services, improving coordination of interagency efforts, and create a culture of public service aimed at addressing and satisfying our users. To build a more inclusive society that is more just, that is an ongoing challenge. And opportunities require new innovations that will address inequalities, strengthen social safety nets, and increase a common stake for all citizens, housing, also community development and health policies that will respond to the ever-changing needs of our constituents. This is a summary of the 4 speeches that are contained within the white paper. And I tried to provide not only a 4-year administration perspectives, but also some of the lessons learned for Chile, as well as valuable reflections for all of Latin America. So the long-term view in terms of creating fundamental state policies, the capacity to adapt to global challenges, these are elements that all the countries in the region can consider a part of their new development strategies. At the IDB, we are fully committed to support Chile and the entire region in our efforts through our new institutional strategies. We are emphasizing greater drive in development of innovations in dealing with new challenges. I'd like to invite and thank Dr. Larraín for creating this event where we have our 4 former presidents. We'll discuss the development of a prosperous future and their own experiences. So I invite all of us here in person and online to view this white paper and to share actively in the building. And now I offer the floor to Felipe Larraín. Good morning. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I would like to just extend warm greetings to President Bachelet, President Frei, Eric Parrado, and Winter, who will participate in the presentation of this white paper, and all of you who have joined us here at the IDB, and all of you who are here in person and online. First of all, I'd like to thank you for accepting the invitation. I think the presentation of this publication is going to be of mutual benefits to all. I'd like to say to Eric, with whom we've worked together. I'd like to thank Mariela, who has helped us significantly. I would also like to thank President Eduardo Frei, Ricardo Lagos, Michelle Bachelet, President Piñera, who without their valuable contributions, we would not have this publication. I'd like to thank the 12 outstanding panelists who have supported us throughout the development of this publication. I'd like to especially thank President Boris and President Juan Manuel Santos, Nobel laureate, who have a few months ago shared their perspectives when we introduced this publication at the Catholic University headquarters in Santiago, Chile. So we're very happy to have this audience and the hundreds that have already followed us in this. I think this meeting is a testimony of the democratic spirit shared in our country. And Juan Manuel Santos, Nobel laureate, who in the previous ceremony held in Santiago, who stated that this publication will make it possible to make changes and move forward in the proposals that are based on dialogue within the democratic institutions. More than a year ago, in April 2023, we began our work in this project with the aim of finding how we could project Chile in the future and not lose sight of this development dream that is a challenging endeavor that can be achieved. We are immersed in various we were embroiled in short-term views and discussions that have slowed us down. But we were able to create this dialogue space that was able to help us in generating public policies that were meaningful in the future. And we were taking advantage of that cross-cutting leadership perspectives of our former presidents, and we invited them to think about Chile over the next 20 years Chile 2050 with our compass point, looking at proposals that will allow us to continue our dream and strive for that dream of a fully developed country. And with the president, I stated that we need to not just talk about our own individual administrations, but also expand on that. And they did that. So during that time, we never imagined that these meetings with projections, analyses would become a publication of historic value. And this would lead to seminars, presidential seminars, with the participation of 4 former presidents that we're honored to host. Everyone generously accepted the invitation. And we met at the Hall of Honor at the University of Chile. We met with former President Lagos on May 18th. On July 15th, we met with President Piñera. And then Eduardo Frei, August 2nd. And finally, we had with us on September 5th, former President Michelle Bachelet. The generosity and that spirit of supporting democratic institutions contributed. And I had the pleasure of speaking with the teams of former President Piñera, who passed away, and we wanted to dedicate this publication in memory of President Piñera and President Lagos, who announced his withdrawal from public service this year. So we are inspired with a spirit of optimism of having these former presidents to take on this challenge, and that we could focus on our dream of becoming a fully developed country. I think we also need to look at the impossible dream with President Piñera, who shared so many years, I had so many years of work with him, 25 years, in fact. He was my professor, he was my friend, and then the only boss that I ever had. And he wasn't an easy boss. He told us, President Piñera said that Chile is faced with enormous challenges. There are many and very complex, but also there are enormous opportunities. He said that during his 2 terms, he faced major crises like the 2010 earthquake, 2020 pandemic, and he stated that in one of his discussions, he said that we should never lose sight that we have the most powerful renewable resource, our people. And as Walt Disney said, if we can dream it, we can achieve it. So it would be unsustainable to continue with these levels of populism, demagoguery, when we look at the social media that sometimes leads us down dead ends. Today, we need to continue to dream about Chile's potential in terms of economic growth, which is the main driver that can lift all of society, but in particular, those most vulnerable, those who want to improve their job opportunities. And of course, growth is not the only major step in our path. We need to have greater certainty, both collectively and individually, and looking at the macroeconomic and fiscal challenges, looking at adverse challenges that we were able to successfully overcome. And regarding these challenges have worsened, especially since between 1990 and 2013. We did have increase in GDP, but then we flattened out in economic growth to only 2%. And this would be a call to action. And just being concerned is not enough. We need to move from concern to response. And the growth that we've seen, as reported by the central bank, a highly respected and objective institution. But according to the central bank, Chile's economic growth is now down to 1.8% annually, which is a cause for concern. So in order to encourage dialogue in the public-private areas, we need to look at those changes that are positive for our countries, those that will generate improvements, changes that will allow us to advance. Former President Eduardo Frei, in his discussion, talked about the openness as economic opening as accelerators. We need to work in institutions, public-private partnerships, as well as modernizing the state to address the challenges that Chile must meet. The former president said, if you don't have economic growth, you have nothing. If you don't have no investment, you have nothing. If you have industrial and societal development, it's going to be very hard to achieve growth. So the current political fragmentation reminds us that we urgently make a move. The former presidents have talked about this. When we look at the number of years that we've been looking at creating meaningful reforms, former President Lagos emphasized in his chapter that we are in the middle of a society where everyone thinks that they're the holders of the ultimate truth. If President Lagos were to advance based on a series of factors that depend on us in order to implement this, and we act, the former president said, advocating to and stating that if we are capable of establishing an environment of specific goals over the next 10 years, we will have taken a major step to create the Chile that we all want to build. Another urgent message has to do with the development of a sustainable and sustained development model to leverage the advantages of globalization. For former President Bachelet, economic growth has been and will be indispensable for our country's welfare and society, but it needs to be innovative, sustainable, and inclusive. Productivity in our society is a key component to address these barriers. She stated that, and I quote, "We need to rethink our developmental model so that it's not a cause of our backwardness and vulnerabilities. With a future vision," she stated, and I quote, "We need that those who are leading us think of the country instead of themselves and their short-term electoral goals. We need to have a country view, a whole of country view. And of course, this requires a society that is trained with the skills that are up to the challenges." One of the key pillars that was described and is cross-cutting, and in this series of seminars and the publication, was education. As Erica mentioned earlier, there's a consensus that we need to improve the quality of education as well as equal access at every level to quality education. Education isn't just a tool for individual fulfillment and development, but for the entire society. We need to have a proactive series of measures, invest in our youth. That is essential. Thinking specifically in the country's future, that we have brought this publication for you to review, and our purpose is to how can we make that quantum leap so that we can improve the well-being of our society from the perspective of these four outstanding figures in politics. And each meeting where we've had, in addition to the four former leaders, we've had experts, analysts, and we've shown that we can promote a constructive dialogue. We need to foster areas for cooperation where every sector of society can express their own perspectives and priorities to address the challenges that we face. Just want to quote the words of President Boris, who said during his intervention with the publication, he said that in Chile, we cannot simply commit the sins of Adam. I am aware of the future, but for this to be fully realized, we need to strengthen our institutions, and in particular, those of us who are public servants need to achieve consensus. We have an opportunity, and we call on the former presidents to make the most of this opportunity. Looking at the publication divided by the various terms, starting with President Frei. He says, I'm fully convinced that we have a country of opportunities that need to be maximized socially, economically, educationally. President Lagos said that these challenges are going to be very, very relevant. We need to achieve a consensus because beyond our political circles, we all want the best for Chile. President Piñera gave us his formula of liberty and equity and social inclusion. And we hope that in this new phase that we are living, we will have the same wisdom that a generation of Chileans showed success in overcoming and creating a new restored democracy. We need long-term perspectives. We need state policies, not just individual administration policies. And I've reached the conclusion that we've invited these former presidents to dream on Chile 2050 and a desire to include their perspectives that gives us an understanding that we have much more in common than what separates us, and we can regain that path to development and progress that our future generations so deserve. So I cannot refrain from thinking that, and just to present a challenge, this exercise conducted in Chile could possibly be replicated in other Latin American countries and the Caribbean. Maybe it's not possible for all, as President Juan Manuel Santos said, but as we bring together these renowned individuals in our region, this would be hugely useful. And at the same time, just leave aside our differences and just work on achieving these noble objectives. This exercise is a specific example that shows we can meet the future challenges with optimism and at the same time a spirit of support and inclusion. We need to extend that to other countries in the region. Let's work together for the future of our countries and for Latin America as a whole. So the dream of Chile 2050 is in our hands. Thank you very much.
I now have the honor of introducing you to former President Eduardo Frei. Good morning. My greetings to President Bachelet. I'm very pleased that we have dedicated this book to the memory of our colleague who so tragically and unexpectedly died. Thank you to Felipe for this effort that we were all involved in. So, just a bit about Chile. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I think most of you are, but that shows you how long of a country it is. And here We have the view from the south of Chile to Argentina. If you look at the arrow, you see that we reach the borders of Antarctica. Cape Horn. This is one of the extreme points of Latin America. You can see here where the marine bases are located. Cape Horn. We're about 700 kilometers away from Chilean Antarctica. Just to put us in the context of Latin America, these are very clear data, no explanation needed. This is what is of most concern. It is one of two of the world's region where there is no developed country. That is a tragedy. Among other things, I believe because we have not been capable of integrating. The 60s, 70s, 80s, there were many Latin American presidents that sought integration so that we could compete in the world. And now it's even clearer than it was back then that we cannot compete if we don't integrate. In Asia, there are more than 100 cities with more than 30 million inhabitants, and that is our total population. So the different agreements that were concluded at their time, practically none of them persist. That is the reality. So we are a country of 20 million inhabitants, 8.8% are immigrants. Approximately 900,000 of those are Venezuelan immigrants. Last week at the UN, the president said that Chile would be taking in even more immigrants. But we shall see. This is clear. I will be giving you some figures, but it is clear. This is the situation. Santiago, these days, with nearly 8 million inhabitants. It's one of the largest Latin American capitals. Chile has, and those who spoke before me have stated, has had a good track record since the 1990s. 29,000 US per capita GDP, which is the highest in Latin America. We would have hoped that we would exceed that of some of the richer countries, which were major powers at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. In Chile, we're small, but doing well. So we went from being a poor country to a middle-class country. We reduced poverty and inequality. And that's not me saying that. That's what the figures indicate. There you see it. When we took office as a coalition, we had nearly 40% poverty, and we were able to reduce that. So the figures are clear, they're up on the screen. This shows Chile's development and growth, which is the result of great sacrifice and effort by a number of administrations. So during my administration, I remember this well, we saw great human development. We rank first in Latin America in human development. And it might seem that we're wrong that this lasted over 30 years, but this is the life expectancy, and it is of that of a developed country. Chile's life expectancy is even better than the US, as you can see by the different shades of green. The lowest country risk in Latin America. Another example of the democracy index. Why this photograph? How many Latin American countries, how many countries in the world could show a photograph like this of all of its former presidents in democracy coming together? This is how you build a country. When I took office, I said that this is going to be the first administration like mine in 50 years. And we made changes. But we got there and we didn't say, okay, we're going to start from zero. We are going to dovetail on what's already been done. We wanted to be a responsible administration, especially coming out of 20 years of dictatorship. Here, once again, you can see some of the statistics. I'm not making any of this up. These are official statistics. Now, we dropped a bit from 19th to 25th, so we've got to work on that. To be able to do that, we need to continue to have an open economy. We are an economy open to the world that we were not in the past. The greatest economic freedom in the region. We have free trade agreements with the most important markets, APEC in 1994, NAFTA here in Miami. And it took 10 years to get there. The European Union, Mercosur, Canada, Asia, China, South Korea. This is not a quote from me. That is one that I took. Our openness to trade. All of these agreements are in place. We have agreements in place with 64 different countries. And we are renegotiating some of those. And after 20 years in place, they have to be renegotiated to address the new realities. When we initially negotiated them, there was no such thing as the digital economy and some of the cyber issues. We will have 70 in place once the negotiations end. We are protected in the WTO, which is not very strong these days. What protects us? It's our agreements. It's these treaties. We have strategic treaties to address some of the complex issues, situations that we have to grapple with, and we are protected by the agreements we have concluded. 75% of Chile's GDP resides in foreign trade. That was impossible to even dream of back in the 60s and 70s. 2/3 of this is in Asia. When I took office, it was just a teeny percentage. Now it's about, it used to be a third US, a third Europe, and now it's 2/3 of Asia. And most of the investment coming to Chile comes from that part of the world. 95% of our GDP exits from our ports. So we have to modernize we began to modernize them in the late 90s, but we have to continue to do that. We are building new ports. We cannot be left behind. We have to continue to work to maintain our export agenda. We are the main producers of copper in the world. We have top-notch mining, the second largest producer of wood pulp in the world. Now that we're talking about climate change and renewable energy, here's Atacama, our desert. We have dozens of new plants that have been opened in recent years. And as Eric was saying, agriculture, forestry, aquaculture, not just mining. Before we did not have that, but nowadays we have more and more. For many years, we were competing with the Norwegians to become the first in the world, but we saw that we couldn't quite manage that. But ours is better for the production timelines. We have Chilean companies and others working in salmon. So we are the second largest salmon producers in the world. And we have to keep doing that. We have to take care of that industry. I don't even need to go into this. Everyone knows about our wines and our grapes. We're known for wines. Here's our Central Valley, the wine route. This is a beautiful photo taken by some Latin Americans who had come to visit. So again, we are more than just copper and wood pulp. We have fruit. We have other exports. I had the honor of opening Cerro Paranal, which is the largest European South Observatory. Chile is one of the main astronomical centers in the world in terms of astronomy research. We have massive telescopes. This began during my administration. These are located in Atacama. This is the largest radio telescope in the world. Most developed countries make use of this. Infrastructure development. This was another huge step that we took. We could not compete internationally without improved infrastructure. We had an infrastructure council and all ministries were involved, as was academia. There were more than 100 partners involved. We had to have a long-term vision for development, public-private partnerships. This is the only way our countries can grow and reduce poverty. That's something that we learned from Asia, and we continue to do this. We have to do it at all costs. It would not have been possible in the past. Yeah, unfortunately, our great road network is now being used by criminals, but it was important. Drinking water, sewage, we used to be criticized, but thanks to our relationship with the IDB, we were able to move forward. And the IDB said in 2020, Chile is a success story in private concessions and reached universal coverage with high standards. Here we see Chile. These are OECD figures for water and sewage rates. Renewable electricity generation. We have improved here. We are close to becoming one of the top countries in the world in terms of share of renewable electrical generation, just renewables. So we're at 40, we're going to get to 50 and quite soon up to 60%. Why is that so important? It's because of what's awaiting us in the future. Chile offers great opportunities. We have a mix of resources that will be needed for the energy revolution. We have water, and we have lithium. We have solar energy. It's crazy what we're seeing. In northern Chile, we are producing more energy than we can even send into the center. green hydrogen, which is also a very important resource. Once again, water, windmills. We have the resources, but we have to make it the most. This unprecedented combination can help us make this leap to be a multi-export country. We have copper, lithium, we're a bit stagnant there. Important decisions have to be made that will help us. It's the future of green energy. We have a large steel plant in Chile, but we can make it green. So we have steel, we have the renewable energy. We have to make the most of the opportunities, and we have to do so quickly. Now, can this positive track record continue? Here's where we are. There's the trap of middle income countries. That's where we are. Now, are we going to be able to take the leap and become a developed country? I think so. Here are the extremes. We all know what's happening in Haiti, but you can contrast that with Norway. But this is the reality. Looking back at 2019 and some of the social unrest, much has been written about this, much will continue to be written about it, but we had social unrest, and we've seen growing levels of crime. Chile had been building and with great effort for many years, and just in a single day, it all came crumbling down. 10 metro stations were set ablaze. Here you can see some of the tragic photos. A church was burned because after the social unrest, there came a period where criminals decided to just destroy everything, churches, metro stations, and not just in Santiago. And that is something we cannot allow. Unfortunately, this is the reality. We have many immigrants who came. And in Chile, they found a place to live and work, but unfortunately, we're seeing a rise in crime. We have crime rates that we had never seen before. And that, of course, curbs development, it curbs growth. In the past, in Chile, nothing would happen. Now you get to a hotel and they tell you to not go out past 8 p.m. We've also seen an increase in drug trafficking, what other countries have experienced in Mexico, Ecuador. So was this social unrest just the beginning? We have to have government policy that involves everyone. We cannot allow the insecurity to continue. We have to make sure that all of the country, all institutions are engaged in the battle against this scourge. And excessive red tape, as Eric was saying. We have this term in Chile, permisología. It's a term we coined to mean red tape. An ambassador visited us recently and said, "What does this word mean, permisología?" And what it means is excessive red tape, and it is truly limiting our ability to move forward. The energy sector, renewable energy, 62% of the investment is being held up. It was about almost $68 billion in investment, foreign investment, but the those investments are being held up because of this excessive bureaucracy and red tape. We have to pass legislation that will be effective. Many projects take several years, 8 years, and companies don't want to wait that long, and so they decide to leave. But this figure, the 62%, is from September 9th, so less than a month ago. Foreign investment, logically, therefore, has started to drop because of this. There are opportunities. I believe we have many. Are there threats? Yes. What we have to do with threats is we have to isolate them. We have to then tackle them so that we can also simultaneously pursue our opportunities. We had sustained growth for many years. Now, populism, we've seen that has failed throughout Latin America. Democracy is the best path for growth, but development is not easy. And I'm going to wrap up, but there are no shortcuts. What we have to do is come to a political agreement. Without a political agreement, and we had 2 constitutional conventions. These were rejected by the people of Chile, and that was important. But if we do not have good policies, the country cannot move forward. Because if you have the stability, investors will come, growth will come. Without that, we cannot. We cannot have a Congress with 22 different political parties. It takes months or years to get anything done. So, good public policies to achieve growth. As Patricio Elwin stated when he took office, this is the time for great politics. More of the same? No. Innovation for growth. We have to take advantage of the opportunities at hand. I trust in Chile. I'm confident in Chile, as I always have been. I do believe the conditions are in place for us to be able to continue to do what we've done for decades now. Some are pessimistic and they say we can't do it, but we did for 30 years. And why were we able to achieve that? Because we had political coalitions. For 30 years, we were able to rise in all of the different ratings, social development, economy. We realized that to triumph over a dictatorship and move forward, we needed democracy. We understood back then that dialogue was important. And that is what Chile did and can continue to do. So thank you for the invitation. I am sure that Chile will find its way toward a much better and prosperous future. There are a few moments left. I am very pleased to introduce President Michelle Bachelet, and I invite her to the podium. Good morning, everyone. My greetings to Eric Parrado, President Eduardo Frei, Cecilia Morel, Felipe Larraín, the director of Calape, and Brian, all of our friends here. I am not even going to fall into the trap of wanting to talk about my administration. I'm just going to go forward. And nothing negative, but every point raised is true, but there are nuances and dimensions that we have to take a look at. I will get to that permisología or red tape and talk about the strategic committee and what we tried to do that. But thank you for inviting me to be here to present this book. It was a beautiful photo that you showed, Eduardo, where we were all together. That also included President Piñera. And thank you to the Catholic University to invite all of us as former presidents to share what our experiences were. After 2 administrations, I always maintained that you start to see what's important. There's not much time to think strategically. Of course, you have your platform, your 4-year platform, but there's not time for great strategic analysis because you've got to just make sure that you're meeting the needs of the public and dealing with putting out fires or dealing with issues. At one point, we had so many things going on, and I thought the only thing we're missing is for a meteor to crash down on us. But I always said, well, things can always get worse. I say, okay, well, that's not necessarily true, but yes, it's tough. This publication compiles very positive positions, but it doesn't address every single topic. But the effort was made to put together some ideas for what for each of us were the most important. We all have different perspectives, but which complement one another. And I do think there were many points in common. Last year, we were thinking about the future of Chile, and we, as those who spoke before me, who said much of what we thought of can apply to all of Latin America. It's important to have open dialogue with our neighbors because while each country has its own particular characteristics, there are challenges that are shared. They are global. No one is going to be able to solve these problems on their own. For example, if we look at migration, some of the root causes in the countries where immigrants leave, and then in destination countries like Chile. There are major challenges. These are global challenges, and we are not going to be able to solve them on our own. So cooperation, collaboration, and regional integration are necessary. Trade integration is a very low rate. We have very low rates of trade integration. We heard Eduardo talking about our trade with Asia, and our foreign trade and investment primarily comes from there. It's important for addressing these multiple challenges, and because we are all clear on the fact that we cannot do it on our own, and no country can. The first challenge I wanted to address, regional and international, and that we in the UN call the triple planetary crisis. People talk about climate change, but it's much more than climate change. The others are pollution, the number of people who die in early deaths because of pollution, like those who have to cook with kerosene or are inhaling smoke in their kitchens. And then we have viruses, pandemics like COVID. Nobody knows if COVID started in a lab or not, but we don't know. But we do know that viruses can be transmitted from animals to humans. So when we intervene in nature and we destroy biodiversity, we are opening ourselves up to new pandemics and new consequences. In Chile, we have had to face the impact in Porto Alegre. We saw this in many parts of the region, but it's not just forest fires, floods, droughts. There are many different challenges, economic, scientific, and cultural.
So this cooperation and bringing together efforts, this existed only in the scientific arena, where scientists would share pertinent information to see exactly how they could develop vaccines to deal with the challenges of the pandemic. But each country tried to buy all the vaccines and equipment. And if we continue to behave in this way, we're not going to be able to address many of the challenges. So looking at this triple global crisis, our response is going to be crucial, especially coming up with joint efforts between the governments, between the private sector. It's the only way we're going to be successful in grappling with challenges. So I think the public-private partnerships are important, but the role of the state is essential. States that take on, without their efforts, we would not have been able to deal successfully with these challenges by the pandemic. Of course, then the private sector joined in, but let me state that my belief is that the key here is in public-private cooperation. It's the only way in which we will find solutions to these urgent priorities, because any delays can just exacerbate the possibilities of global catastrophe. Our analyses have not been very enlightening. We are, in fact, lagging behind in terms of achieving the sustainable development goals. So what can we do in the face of all this? We need a transformation of the economic system. We need sustainable development policies. In the case of Chile, we need to move toward strengthening human capacities vis-a-vis the environment and renewed economic development models so that we can maximize the digital economy and new technologies. Innovation is always seen as the answer, but after having attended so many seminars on innovations, we seem to see more of the same, and it became boring and not very innovative. We need to put in more effort. So I think economic growth has to be inclusive and sustainable. We are working toward a green economy, and as Eduardo said, we are moving in that direction with green hydrogen and lithium. In 2014, during my second administration, we established the National Lithium Commission to more fully develop that element. It was cross-cutting and technical, with agreements that are continuous, and they have been continued by President Boris, that will involve the private sector, the industrial sector, with more public-private partnership in where we are meeting transparency as well as sustainable development standards, so that we can reinforce the value to the public. In terms of green hydrogen, we're going to see investments of $330 billion. And that's why it's important that we continue developing this industry. And our action plan for fostering greater green hydrogen is, again, moving in the right direction for 2030. And I think it goes along similar to lines to what you indicated, Felipe. This committee was somewhat varied from the perspective of policies, gender policies. In fact, we were 6 women and 4 men on that commission: economists, people from the universities, people from the private sector, ecologists, and we were able to reach consensus. We had support from President Piñera in the area of green hydrogen development. So we were able to achieve a common language that showed consensus and working together peacefully, just like with the free trade agreement negotiations, where everybody tries to reach consensus on the terms. But beyond political ideologies, we have this perspective that major encompassing projects involve more of governments. If I were to have a measure here where we have, well, President Piñera, and we have, for example, the continuous development of our public transportation system, like the metro, and it continues with the next administration. So we have to get away from short-term perspectives. This requires policies, strategies, and long-term agreements. So this has ensured Chile's success, as Eduardo said, that this would be continued by upcoming administrations and governments, carrying out also a transformation process in our electrical energy grids. We need to continue moving forward. Green hydrogen and its derivatives are fundamental in our decarbonization efforts in our industries. We are achieving carbon neutrality, but this is going to require non-polluting sources, as well as renewing our environmental resources. Chile has all of the potential, including green hydrogen, that will spur on growth, spur on innovation, generate growth at the local as well as regional and national levels that can put us in the forefront of sustainable development for our country as well as for our planet. But our strategic perspective in terms of green hydrogen, this is where we said this is a new kind of industry, one that we're not very familiar with, that we're looking at carefully with very little development so far. So this new kind of industry requires that sustainable, working in unison with adjacent communities that will generate local value. It's not a question of having a business investing in that community. They take the money out and they leave nothing. So the governor of Magallanes and Antofagasta, where we had the initial projects, and just looking at the perspective here, the natural trend for businesses is to say we need to lower standards and that way we can do better business. Well, no, here we are working on increasing standards. We want to attract investors from European countries, countries with high standards. So we need to look at why have these processes been held up? And we need to look at changes to the standards and regulations. And where you have energy mining projects. And we had 3 people studying all of these projects, but the idea here was there would be more state intervention, but we need to look at this. And it's not a question of just red tape. We need to increase the response by governments to deal with these challenges. To have a more political cross-cutting agreement to do that, we needed to work with the political parties, the legislators, so that we can reach agreement on what needs to be cut out, what needs to be streamlined, modernized. We also need to look at the capacity and capabilities of all of the stakeholders, but we cannot lower standards. No, Chile has to maintain the highest standards because many of the statistics Eduardo has provided are true. But I think GDP was at about 14,500 per capita. And where we see some communities with low resources that have again, $14,500 per capita income. What about I've never seen 14,500 per person in some countries. These are macro statistics that, of course, there's certain elements that influence on this, but we said we cannot just be extractive in our industries. We also need to have technology transfer to our local universities, and we need to add value. And we have to look at the gender perspectives as well. We need to see what are the profiles of those that are going to be working in these industries. We need to train women in these areas who have been more neglected in these sectors. And we have some successful experiences, for example, in the copper industry. And we need to train women who have excellent leadership skills. For women, a great advantage is our skill, our dexterities and skills. And for example, in Germany, most of the technicians that work on the telescopic equipment, lenses, are women because they're much more into the detailed, skillful dexterity requirements. And they were much more precise, and they are much more precise. Women were able to do a better job of pinpointing precisely the lens and other skills. So again, with these challenges, we have many opportunities as well. We can also address other major challenges, including inequality. According to data, inequalities haven't changed since 2017, after we were able to successfully reduce barriers. Now, of course, the pandemic also was a setback after 18 years of uninterrupted development. So neoliberal policies during the dictatorship favored businesses, but they left many Chileans were left without access to basic services, including education and health. The subsequent governments made a great deal of progress in addressing these challenges. And as the High Commissioner of Human Rights, we saw how pandemic revealed so many of the major inequalities. Chile, of course, was no exception here. We know that growth is a lever for reducing economic inequalities, but we also need solidarity and redistribution policies to rectify many of these market failures. And we need to have measures that will reinforce social cohesion. And this is one of the tasks that are going to be key in the future. Together with economic development, we also need to address the high informal market and economy. Although it's not as high as other countries, it's still enough of a priority to address. It was mentioned recently that 120,000 new jobs were created, but 70% of them were in the informal economy. So we still have a major task ahead of us in dealing with this. And in the Latin American context, which is, again, as was mentioned earlier, and when we had the seminar in Chile in August, the education gap is another major challenge in paving the way for more equal distributions. So access to education, of course, is going to help address that. Now, not only do we need to continue increasing education opportunities for women, we also need to provide greater labor and job opportunities for women. The Chilean Central Bank had an estimate of the costs to the economy if, for example, childcare could be funded. I think it would increase by 21%, in other words, profitability. And Today, of course, it's a very key priority. In addition to that, we need to make much more progress in, again, education for women. Many women do not get into some of the high-paying career paths. I'm also concerned with the artificial intelligence arena. We know that provides opportunities and is highly useful, and we're seeing multiple AI services, but we cannot overlook the enormous risks. As High Commissioner for Human Rights, I met with people from the Silicon Valley industries. We discuss the advantages without looking at the negative impacts of AI. And without these, we need to evaluate these. Otherwise, we're going to waste a lot of resources in projects that cannot be used subsequently because they constitute violations of human rights.
When I was in Silicon Valley, and I don't even remember which companies, but 80% of developers were white men. Latinos accounted for 4%, but just 2% were programmers. The other 2%, worked in janitorial services, and then Asians represented the rest of the workforce. And that is what leads to many of the biases. In terms of Afro descendants, and women were being left out of the equation. So people's biases are transmitted through their designs and what they develop. So we have to be very careful about AI, ensure that we have regulations to mitigate some of the risks and dangers. But wrapping up, it's important for solid democracies. We have to look at Chile and all of the countries in the region. We have to strengthen the public's democratic conviction. We've seen that support for democracy is falling, and there are groups of people in most of the recent surveys who say, okay, democracy may not be perfect, but it's the best system. But we saw a rise from 13 to 17% of persons who would prefer an authoritarian government to a democracy. That does not mean that the solution is having authoritarian governments. It means that democracies have to deliver. You have to deliver on your promises. And Chile and Latin America, we've seen that how difficult it is to recover democracies. If we see that democracy is the objective, we have to ensure that candidates cannot promise what they know they're not going to be able to deliver. There are situations unforeseen, but this has happened to us. But there are those who promise things knowing that they're not going to be able to deliver is an issue. In my campaign, I talked about tax reform. And we had private sector representatives, and they said, "Oh, are you going to be able to do that?" And they said, "Oh," and then my administration started to do it, and they said, "Oh, well, you're actually going to do this? We didn't think so." And I said, "But I've been talking about this the whole time." These have to be progressive reforms where people who have the most have to contribute their fair share. People have to be able to believe. We have to determine how to rebuild trust, justice, because there's a lot of lack of trust in the region. And Chile, in particular, there's a lack of trust in elected representatives, in the fact that promises will be delivered upon. We've seen extremist, populist, authoritarian leadership. A significant increase in the region. And we saw Cristobal Rivas talk about this with the support. There were 3 case studies, Chile, Argentina, and Mexico. I think I would suggest you read it because this is an obsession that I've had in recent years. It's about subjectivity and how perspectives have changed the way that people relate to one another. It's a very interesting study for us to understand how we can reach people and make sure to meet their needs and make promises that we can deliver upon. So these authoritarian demagogues tend to put in very simple language, very complex problems that do not have straightforward solutions, but they appeal to people's fears. And that's a major risk in the region. We cannot move backward, particularly, for example, in what women have achieved in sexual reproductive rights. And this doesn't just affect women. We have to go back and fix this social fabric that's been worn away. When I was young, unions were very strong. The social structure was very strong. But these days, the social fabric is very thin and fraying. And political leaders have to play a key role. They have to promote respect and eliminate smear campaigns, avoid hate speech online, offline, and fight against fake news because that impacts serious political dialogue. I have convictions and I have hope. Some days I'm a little less hopeful than others, but I am going to use something that Desmond Tutu said. Desmond Tutu said that I am a hostage to hope. So I have the conviction and hope that if all sectors come together, Chile can be a country with inclusive and equitable growth and one where people can live together with a dignified and just life. It is my honor to invite to the stage Cecilia Morel, former First Lady. I don't know if I should be saying good morning or good afternoon, my dear friends. I would like to begin by thanking you all, thanking Eric, and thank all of you for this invitation to be here at the launch of this important book. So Chile 2050, One Country, Four Presidents. The matter four presidents is very important because Felipe, who showed us that really moving photograph of all the presidents together. But I would also like to thank especially Presidents Bachelet and Frei for being here today. I would like to thank the IDB for offering this opportunity. And of course, my thanks for the homage paid to my husband, Santiago Piñera. I am both proud and moved by all of the warmth. It helps us to continue to move forward and to share the positive side of his administration. I'm from CIAPES, from the University of Chile, which is spearheaded by Felipe Larraín, former finance minister. And we've heard everything we've seen. Chile became an example, a role model in the region. We've seen the economic and social indicators. We moved from being one of the least productive in the OECD to one of the most productive. We've seen extreme fracturing. Everybody has mentioned it. This has been very negative for our country. We have to put the well-being of the country above party and electoral results. As we've heard, populism, demagoguery, showed that people are thinking in the short term rather strategically, long term, and in the best interests of the country. We heard that from Presidents Bachelet and Frei, where we've heard about populism and promises that cannot be delivered upon. Sebastián would agree with that. He was part of the Elwin administration, where they started to work on labor and tax reforms without even thinking about the potential of these agreements amongst parties. The vision was always that of the country. And we've seen that in this book and everything that has been done. For me, I am proud to see this Republican, this democratic spirit. We've seen this when President Santos was in the presentation in Santiago. Felipe, he was saying, here, these are presidents who respect one another, who can be together. They're not insulting one another, not trying to stab each other in the back, as one say. It is both a luxury and a source of pride for us as Chilean. And also, Santiago always said that comprehensive and inclusive development leaves nobody behind. We heard President Bachelet say this as well. Little by little, day by day, every single day, working toward this with freedom. Without freedom, it's not possible, but with patience, with respect, with effort, and with solidarity. And we heard President Bachelet reiterate those words. We need this spirit from our political class. We've seen the potential in these two administrations that Sebastián had. As we said, the only thing that we didn't have was a meteor come crashing down, but there were all sorts of issues he had to grapple with. But together we can do what is within the realm of possibility to reach success. We have to prevent something that we have seen, which is school dropout rates rise. Young people, when we see what's happening with crime and the serious public security issues, we see that these are children, these are teenagers, 12, 13-year-olds who are becoming involved in crime. They drop out of school and then they become pawns of drug traffickers. But in Chile, we were not used to these levels of crime. It has become very serious. It's one that began some time ago, but it's going to continue. We have to come together to come up with quick solutions to improve public security. President Frei alluded to this. What all Chileans want from any administration, first and foremost, is security. But thank you once again. I'm not going to get too much into politics, but I thank all of those of you who supported Sebastián and his administrations. I want to thank my friends, Marcelo. I can't fail to raise your name. When Sebastián was studying at Harvard, you were a great support. Rodrigo, and we shared those years. Many of you were not around back then, but for me, I have great memories of those times. So thank you very much for your friendship, for your warmth from each and every one of you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the participants, President Frei, President Bachelet. I'd like to thank Eric for his comments. It is a pleasure. And now I'd like to invite Vice President for Countries, Anabel Gonzalez, who is connected via Zoom, as well as the editor from America's Quarterly, Brian Winter, who has now stepped up on the stage. We're going to have a discussion with our panelists. Mr. Winter. Well, I'd just like to say that this presentation has really been a great opportunity. Thank you, President Frei, President Bachelet, Cecilia. I think this reflects what we would like to create. We want to achieve national consensus when we talk about national development. This, again, has been a real pleasure. I'm going to offer the floor to Anabel Gonzalez, Vice President for Countries, an expert in regional integration, and I'm sure she's going to discuss that. So I'm going to offer the floor first to Anabel Gonzalez and Brian Winter for comments. Thank you, Anabel. Go ahead. Thank you, Eric. And the fact is, it is a great honor. Can you hear me? Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It truly is an honor for me to be a part of this panel discussion where we have a richness of experiences and perspectives, and I'm glad that we're able to share this. I also want to recognize the efforts of Felipe Larraín, as well as the Center for Social Studies at the Catholic University of Chile, where we have a forum with four former heads of state. I think this is a timely initiative because Chile, just as other countries in the region, are facing challenges and opportunities, and they need to rethink public policy formulations. This is an example how where you have willingness, respect, and good ideas, you can have discussions and dialogues of this level in an effort to achieve consensus, and it needs to be replicated. My comments are going to focus on three areas. First of all, we're going to look at the regional and global context of this type of discussion, also looking at the ideas already expressed by the former heads of state and how can we move forward in democratic reforms. We know that Latin America, and this is my first point, Latin America is a region of great economic, social diversity. Chile is a case in point. We represent 8.8% of the population of the earth. We generated 8% of GDP, and we have 40% of the planet's biodiversity, and we produce 40% of food that is traded internationally, and we represent 60% of lithium reserves that are essential for energy transition efforts. That's why Latin America has major opportunities in addressing such global changes as climate change, loss of biodiversity, and food security. At the same time, the region can leverage the advantages of digital and energy transition and transformation. However, Latin America has several challenges that limit these opportunities. Social demands, limited fiscal resources, and slow economic growth. All of that exacerbated by poverty, inequality, violence, and crime. Also, external factors such as disruptions in the supply chain, pandemics, and the technology evolution and changes in demographic changes, such as an aging population. All of that presents traditional challenges. The region is also stagnant in certain social development indicators. Now, we need quality policies and investments that are sustainable, but agreements to achieve these that have to be, first of all, overcome political polarization, which hinders consensus. This results in held up policies and efforts and a loss of opportunities. That's the paradox that Chile is faced with, as well as a large segment of countries in the region and also outside the region. Let me just refer to the second point, Chile, and where are those areas of common consensus for making progress. One thing that surprised me is that all of the former presidents believe, at least I believe, that a developed Chile is possible. They all stated that. They looked at their focus on a fully developed Chile. President Piñera also said, if Chile grows at 6%, which is, of course, significant, this would achieve the levels of Portugal's income growth for 2020. So it's possible. Starting in 1990, the 34 mid-income countries have been able to raise their levels to high-income countries. 1/3 benefited from joining the European Union. Now, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. In creating this aspiration for a developed Chile, all the presidents assume that it is feasible as long as we're able to address the bottlenecks that have limited growth. So growth, education, and security are priority areas where actions are required, in addition to the challenges posed by climate change. Former President Frei said that if we don't have economic growth, we have nothing. In his opinion, and I, as chief of the negotiations for the free trade agreement between Costa Rica and Chile, and I totally agree, Chile needs more trade, more open economies, more infrastructure investments, digital and physical investments. And we need to overcome the red tape that was discussed by President Frei. In Germany, an in-depth reform was able to achieve such as a result of it required to conduct a major dam project. It required 34,000 pages of permits. And Germany then introduced reforms that completely changed that. Former President Bachelet states that growth needs to be based on increasing productivity and to be a sustainable and inclusive innovator. And I would also like to add, it needs to be sustainable over the long term. Now, improving education occupies a special place in the priorities of the former presidents of Chile, as well as the 2050 initiative. And I think these are long-term challenges that were exacerbated by the shocks of the pandemic. The diagnosis is well known. We need to improve the quality of public education. We need to make it more in accord with the current challenges that includes technology, innovation, AI, improve the labor market, provide more technical development and educational opportunities. Now, strengthening governance and the efforts to combat crime are also top priorities. According to the World Bank, the governmental effectiveness, the rule of law, and corruption control have had a major impact over the last decade. The homicide rate is 3 times higher than the global average, and 1/3 of homes were victims of some crime last year. So that's why we need to combat crime. That's essential in order to increase productivity and investments. That requires increasing efforts towards intelligence operations, combat criminal groups, and address those at-risk children. We need to have measures that will include a regional alliance to strengthen security measures. Although we've identified some priority action areas, a question comes up is how can we make progress in our path toward development? Democracy needs to be strengthened and protected. The best way to do that is that we need to generate new results. President Bachelet stated, and I heard President Boris said when he talked about the publication a few weeks ago, democracy has to deliver. It needs to be effective, and it needs to enable solutions for citizens to live better lives. The former presidents agree in the publication that they need a long-term perspective with policies of state. As President Frei said, there are no shortcuts. Former President Lagos added that it's essential that we reach consensus in specific measures over the next 10 years. Now, in order to progress toward a better future, it's also important to build on the successes and learn from others. For many years, he has been known to be a leader in global integration as well as trade strengthening. We need to continue work hand in hand with other countries that share international cooperation perspectives. It's also useful to learn the experiences from other countries in the region and outside the region without falling into the trap of replicating poor ideas and measures. To achieve prosperity and development is only going to be possible by having a strong public-private partnership, as stated by former presidents. The private sector is a source of jobs, innovation, and opportunities, but the government needs to create the environment that is conducive for development with a foreseeability that will lead to security so that all businesses, both national and foreign, can contribute meaningfully to the society. Regional cooperation can support national aspirations. Experiences from the past that were not always successful create a certain skepticism about the value of economic integration in our region. However, the challenges faced by Chile are shared by many other countries in the region, where we can also lead to possible solutions. And looking at experiences in Asia and Europe, we need to look at these in an increasingly fragmented world. The search for cooperation and pragmatic measures on the basis of common objectives have now taken on a new importance. And here at the IDB, we are working in that direction. Let me just share with you a story, personal story, that reflects how much I admired Chile and how much I have admired for so many years. In 1998, in my negotiations with the free trade agreement with Chile and Costa Rica, when I was involved in that, I closely followed Chile's joining the Organization for Economic Cooperation. In 2010, when Chile was about to join the OECD, I was invited by the former president, Laura, and I said, why don't we also try to be a part of the OECD? If Chile can do it, why can't Costa Rica do it also? The president then got involved in the process, and finally, Costa Rica joined OECD. And neither Chile nor Costa Rica nor other countries that are a part of the OECD, they still haven't achieved the full dream of development. But Chile continued its efforts with these milestones. And let me just reflect with these words. In 2010, during upheavals, these demonstrations were a very painful lesson for Chile. And I don't fully understood what led to these upheavals, but the Chilean people today are finding ways to address their challenges through the democratic process and through institutions that are a part of the day-to-day activities. But from a perspective, from a global perspective, Chile continues to be an example. At the IDB, we are more than happy to continue to support Chile in all of its efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Annabelle, for those comments. I think they complement very well what the presidents have said. So thank you very much. And thank you for your patience, Ryan. Ryan Winter is the editor-in-chief of America's Quarterly, which is a really important publication for Latin America and the Caribbean. Ryan, thank you very much, Eric. And Good afternoon, everyone. I am very honored to be taking part in this event with the presence of so many leaders who have been an inspiration, not just to Chile, but to the entire hemisphere. Former President Frei and Bachelet. I would also like to express my greetings to the former First Lady and the administration of her husband, and also those who could not be with us today. If you are okay with my Texan, Argentinian, Brazilian accent, I will continue in Spanish. I wanted to tell you about the importance of both this book and this event in a regional context. I think it's coming at an important time for Chile, for the region, and for the world. And I don't think we have to look too far away. This week on Monday, we saw a meeting of Latin American presidents for Claudia Sheinbaum's inauguration. All of the presidents in the photograph were left-wing or center-left progressive presidents. That same day, about 6,000 miles away in Buenos Aires, we saw Anil Bukele and Javier Milei. The two were out on the balcony of the Casa Rosada. These were two completely separate meetings that could have occurred in very different worlds at a time, which many have stated today, where the left and the right in Latin America are not talking to one another. We see often through tweets in 2024, we saw presidents call one another racist, war criminals, terrorists. We had one compare the other to Adolf Hitler. The issue here isn't that it's uncomfortable to hear those kinds of comments. If we look at the main problems being faced by Latin America and the world, they all require collective efforts, whether we're talking about organized crime, as President Frei noted, or climate change, as President Bachelet noted, increased development, trade, are not issues that any country on its own can resolve. We need leaders who are able to have discussions despite their political differences and ideologies. It's important for the present and the future to ensure that democracies, as we have heard today, deliver. In this context, this book is an oasis in the desert. It's a miracle for me as an American to read this book. Really created quite an emotional response. We could not do this in this country at this time. It's important to see leaders who led by example time and time again during the very sensitive times of the democratic reconstruction and the times of concertation, as well as President Bachelet and President Piñera, as they traded off. There was a Republican spirit between left and right-wing leaders. We also have to recognize the people of Chile, as President Bachelet noted. The people of Chile hold the historic memory. There are people in the hemisphere. We're seeing fewer and fewer people who value democracy, except for those who have in recent times lost it. For me, what is truly key and what this book evoked in me was, how do we ensure that this book not just become a lovely memory and the greatest hits of democracy in Chile from the 1990s and early aughts, I don't think the risk for Chile is very big because what Boric is doing is a clear example of this Republican spirit that we've heard mentioned so many times today. We see this with current and former leaders. We see in most cases it's the same spirit. There are other countries in the region where democracy is alive and moving forward. The Dominican Republic, Uruguay. I do believe Argentina, even though it's had some hiccups, but we see that President Milei and former President Fernandez did have their photo taken together during the inauguration, but we are seeing polarization. It's taken root, and in many cases, we're seeing dialogue become impossible inside countries, and we've seen in the US that it is simply not enough to indicate that democracy is at risk or polarization is a problem. It sounds false. It sounds like politics as usual. Tony Blair said that democracy is not about legitimacy, but about efficiency. We have to look at real life problems that affect people. And that is what this book does. So I commend you on your participation. I commend you, Felipe, for putting this project together. That in and of itself is valuable. These are the challenges we're all up against. It would be better for all of us to live in a hemisphere where we can talk to one another despite our differences on matters such as climate change, organized crime, inequality, education. This book shines the light on a path forward for all of us, not just Chileans, not just Latin Americans, all of us. We should study it. We should continue with this conversation so that the values enshrined in this book become a reality for the next 30 years. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ryan, for your enthusiasm, for those comments. We have gone over time. This has all been very interesting, but we have to respect our guest time and your time as well. I just wanted to express an enormous thanks to you, President Bachelet, Felipe, President Frei, Ryan, Anabel, and all of the representatives of the IDB. This is what we want. We want to have a long-term vision of sustainable and inclusive economies and growth. As Desmond Tutu said, and the president said, we're all prisoners of hope. Thank you. Thank you very much.